Hello, my name is Kevin Howard, and I'm the host of Breadcrumbs, a podcast for people who know it's not working. Welcome to episode 23. Here in this episode, I'm going to focus our conversation on the great divide that exists between the huge, too big to grasp existential challenges we face as a humanity on one side and all the resources that are available to solve all of those problems on the other side. I call this episode Show Me the Money. Yeah, we're going there. But before we get into that, because this is what we do here on Breadcrumbs, we talk about difficult conversations, but we talk about them in a way that creates a safe space because we start not from what makes us different, not from our different political ideologies or nationalities or vested interests or whatever, but we start from the basis of our shared experiences. Because most of us have grown up in the same country. I'm an American, United States. Most of you are Americans, though welcome to the rest of the international community. You are certainly welcome to this because you also share something with us, our human experiences. We have a shared humanity and we have shared experiences that are based on the events that we experience in our lives, based on the fact that we have family relationships, we go through education, we absorb a lot of the same media, we share culture. There is so many shared experiences that we can draw on and so much shared humanity that we can draw on that allows us to have a common basis for making sense of the world around us, making sense of each other, and certainly making sense at the conversations we have here on Breadcrumbs. So this is how we look at things. This is how we frame things. I am not going to be accusing you or triggering you or endeavoring to make me seem like I'm either smarter than you or know something you don't know. No, we are neighbors. We are equals. And if I have some information that you haven't heard before, that's part of the value add of this proposition. And what I'm expecting you to do is to go into your AI bot and verify every claim that I make. But the point of the conversations here on Breadcrumbs is for us to come together and make sense of the issues that are actually affecting our lives. So as we have these conversations, I often share my lived experiences. I want you to tap into your lived experiences to see to what extent what I'm saying as the initiator of the conversation makes sense. Does it resonate? Does it align with your experiences? We're not going to have the same experiences, but whether it makes sense, whether it's reasonable, whether it resonates, that we can draw on. Okay. And so for those things that do make sense, for those things that do resonate, that's what you can trust, what you can hold on to. And for the things that, well, that doesn't quite land right with me, you know, set them aside. Don't throw them away because later on you may find that you get additional experiences that help to make sense of those things that even don't make sense now. This is how we learn over time. And so this is how we have these conversations here on Breadcrumbs. So I'm going to ask you, trust what resonates. And for the rest, set it aside for later consideration. So let us begin. The major existential problems, too big to solve problems that seem to be facing blowing up our television screens, right? We start off with a 60-year trend of severe wealth and inequality. Okay, you've heard about this. I've talked about this in multiple episodes here at Breadcrumbs about the details of it. Many of you are experiencing it in some capacity or another. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about, and life has been good for you. And for you, for those of you out there, bless you. I hope it never visits you. But for many Americans, we have been drawn down by this severe wealth and income inequality. And one of the biggest expressions of that, of the severe wealth and inequality in the United States, is the current housing affordability crisis. I've done entire episodes on this crisis, but suffice it to say, affordability of housing is getting to the point where lower income families are choosing to pay their rent and eat less, and it's creating food insecurity amongst large portions of the American population. So that's wealth and income inequality, the first of the major existential, too big to solve type problems. Okay, the first one. The second one, and it's actually caused by that wealth and income inequality, is the degrading of our democracy. Because as we have progressively been experiencing, our government is more and more captured by wealthy interests, by extreme wealth. There have been numerous studies done that show that the American public have almost no impact on the national policy of the country, notwithstanding who we elect. We elect these people, they tell us what we want to hear, they get into the office, and then they serve wealth and power the way they want to. And so what this is doing is degrading our confidence that our votes mean anything. And here's the forefathers of the United States had incredible wisdom, but one of them is this notion that a revolution is timely periodically. And why? Because influence gets to the point where the democracy doesn't work. In other words, you vote these people in, both sides work for the same folks, they only serve wealth. And that's what we are facing today. And so we've had a series of elections, not just in the United States. This cuts across established democracies across Europe, in Canada, in the United States, in Mexico, in North Korea, in Japan, across the global north. You've had a churn in democracies where incumbents who used to always get reelected 90 something percent of the time, we're throwing them out left, right, and center. And I'll give you an interesting example, right? Beyond the United States, what's happening in Canada, what's happening in the UK, right? The Canadian electorate threw out Trudeau, who was, as my understanding, a liberal Democrat, and they elected another liberal Democrat to be their current prime minister. Now, the oddity of that is that they were unhappy with Trudeau and they threw him out, but they weren't quite ready to go conservative. So they stayed with another liberal Democrat. That's one example. In the UK, the Tories, the Conservative Party in the UK, got thrown out. I mean, one of the most unpopular prime ministers in modern British history. And within 2 years, the Labour Party has been in power, and Keir Starmer is their prime minister. And now his approval rating is in low double digits. I have heard somewhere it approaches 11%. I don't even think George W. Bush, at the nadir of the war in Iraq, ever got down to 11% popularity. But I think that's what Keir Starmer is. But at the very minimum, he's the least popular prime minister in recorded British history. The point being that the British electorate elected conservatives, threw conservatives out 2 years ago, elected the Labour Party, and that Labour Party is already in the process of getting thrown out. They just got devastated in the interim elections. There are bets out whether they will survive May for the major elections. So at the end of the day, this is what the political churn looks like when the electorate is saying, we want something different. In the United States, in our country, we went from Barack Obama, Mr. Professorial. And what happened? He was the establishment. We so did not want the establishment that when the Democrats had the audacity to put up Hillary, who is Miss Establishment, they elected Donald Trump the first time. You would have thought that the Democrats would have figured that out. Oh, I see. The electorate doesn't want the establishment candidates. Oh, no, because we responded after the first term of Donald Trump by putting up the old man, Joe Biden. You can't get more establishment than Joe Biden when he got elected to the United States Senate in 1972. Yeah, I didn't stutter. 1972. Okay. We put up another establishment person. The electorate saying, okay, first term of Trump was a bit of a wild card. Maybe we need to come back to center, bring the adults in the room, the establishment, give them one more chance. And what does Biden do? What? Everything blows up under Biden. We have financing and rationalizing genocides. We have the continuation of the forever wars in Ukraine. We have inflation blowing up under his watch. And yet he doesn't do anything but allow the child credit that helped families in America. He let that expire. Inflation peaks at 9.1% in April 2022, and he does no major program to help people out. Okay. So this was supposed to be the adult in the room. Suffice it to say what happens when Kamala Harris says that, oh, I can think of nothing that I would do different than Joe Biden. Oh, okay, so you are the establishment. We gave the establishment another chance. We're going to elect Donald Trump again. And that's what we did. And let's not get it twisted. It wasn't the Proud Boys who elected Donald Trump. I know the establishment media would like to think that. But the highest percentage of African Americans, the highest percentage of Hispanic Americans, the highest percentage of Asian Americans, every measurable major demographic trend went towards Donald Trump between 2020 and 2024. Every trend. 18 to 24, 53, 54%, 25 to 34, 53% voted for Donald Trump. On and on and on, all the way up to the 65 and olders. At 65 and olders, yeah, they dipped. They went from 52% voting for Donald Trump in 2020 to 50%. That's the only exception. The entire demographic breakdown shifted towards Donald Trump. That is how badly the American electorate did not want the establishment. So this is the churn that is destroying democracy. And basically what Donald Trump is doing right now, he promised to end the forever wars, and here he's engaged in this nonsense in attacking Iran again. Here we go. Betrayal of the people who elected him. This is what has ruined American democracy and convinces people that their votes don't matter. What comes next if the American electorate who elected Donald Trump a second time feels betrayed by even him? I don't know. This is what the forefathers were predicting about. Good to have a revolution every once in a while. Here it goes. Okay, so degrading democracies is our second existential challenge that we are facing right now. The third is something called resource overshoot. We consume a lot of stuff. Yeah, go take a look in your garage. I live in a middle class residential neighborhood, and I can tell you this much. I walk my dog Juno. She's a husky, so she got to go forever. And she went out there walking. And one of the most hilarious things that I see, and you tell me if you don't see this in your neighborhood, is there is like 2 or 3 cars parked in every driveway. And yeah, there's a big 2-car garage, at least attached to the house, but there's 2 or 3 cars in the driveway. Why is that? It's not because they happen to have 5 cars. No, it's because they have so much stuff jammed up in that garage that the cars cannot fit in the garage and they have to park in the driveway. Okay, we have so much stuff. Well, that stuff that we continue to buy, that marketing continues to tell us to buy because, hey, by the way, the person you want to be buys this stuff, so you better buy it too if you want to be that person. Yeah, that kind of nonsense. Okay, all that overconsumption, we are drawing out more natural resource than the earth can produce in a year. So there's something called Earth Overshoot Day. And it's the day that we draw out more natural resource. We draw a year's worth of natural resources out. Now, if we were living within the planetary boundaries of the Earth, that day would be December 31st. 2025, Earth Overshoot Day is July 24th, which tells you, right, that by just barely after the first half of the year, we have used a year's resources. And what that is doing is drawing down the available natural resources for future generations. The most severe expression of this is something called the carbon pulse, and it has to do with fossil fuels. The primary energy source that we use for the modern economy, starting with the invention of the internal combustion engine, right? Back in the 1840s and so, 1830s and so, leading into the Industrial Revolution, started in the 1850s or so, is fossil fuels. And here's the thing. Before that, humanity didn't really use fossil fuels. And so for millions of years, all fossil fuels are is millions of years worth of critters and creatures and things decomposed down to the carbon level, and they produce all types of fossil fuels. All right. So we had millions of years of reserves built up when we discovered, aha, we have a new source of energy. Yeah. But in 170 years, we have blown through millions of years of fossil fuels. And literally over the next 50 years, the availability of fossil fuels is going to materially drop. Yeah, we're going to have maybe 50% less fossil fuels available than we have today. Okay. The catastrophic impact of that is well chronicled by numerous people, but my favorite is Nate Hagen's. Go check him out. The Great Simplification. He has a podcast on YouTube and he talks about the carbon pulse amongst other things. Okay. My point is this resource overshoot is serious. We are bankrupting future generations' ability to have the resources they need to sustain future societies. Yeah, that's what we're doing right now. Okay. The next crisis, number 4, yeah, you heard a lot of noise. It's the climate crisis. So let's just cut to the chase. The leading not for profit scientists from 195 nations. There's only 192 nations in the United Nations. So every one of the members of the United Nations, plus 3 other countries. The leading not for profit scientists from 195 countries unanimously say that to give us a 50% chance of avoiding irreversible, catastrophic climate related impacts, we need to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by 43% by 2030. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I woke up today and it was 2026. And what big catastrophic event are they worried about? Well, the first one on the agenda appears to be, because there are others, the tipping point for the melting of the Greenland ice cap. Yeah. And once you pass the tipping point for the melting of the Greenland ice cap, you cannot stop it from melting all the way. Now, it might take another 100 years for it to melt all the way, but once we pass that tipping point, it's happening and there's nothing we can do about it. And so, if the Greenland ice cap melts, the estimated sea level rise, the rise of the ocean, okay, is 8 meters. 8 meters. Okay, 24 feet plus. That will change the coastline of every continent on this planet and will likely destroy every coastal city on the planet. Okay? That's the massive magnitude if we cross the tipping point for the melting of the Greenland ice cap. And so the climate crisis is serious. And I know it's not affecting you right now. It's not affecting us going out and playing around the golf right now. But if you love your children, if you love their children, if you have any concern about legacy, imagine being known as the generation of humanity who knew that this problem existed. But because it wasn't going to affect us, we could care less. Because I can tell you the impacts that the climate crisis can cause will have a material drop on the human population. We got 8.2 billion, and we could have sub 6 billion by the 2100 for a number of things that could happen. All I'm saying to you is that we're not paying attention because it's not affecting us. That is beyond narcissism, but it is real. Okay. So the climate crisis, the estimates to transition us out of fossil fuels to renewable energy and nuclear are at least $131 trillion. Yeah. Insane. Okay. That's one of the big intractable. Wrap your mind around this kind of problem. The fifth one, and it's timely, the economics of war. This is an old story. And for me, it's like a really bad joke told slowly. Okay, but the economics of war. 64 years ago, President Eisenhower, who happened to be a five-star general during World War II and the top military person who led U.S. forces in World War II, when he was leaving office as the President of the United States after serving 8 years, he gave a speech, famous speech, where he warned us about the dangers of the military industrial complex. He was talking about the influence that merging how we make our money, the economics, with the urgency of security, war, because you only go to war to protect your national security interests. So he warned us that if we weren't careful, if we didn't guard with great diligence against the influence of the military industrial complex, we would wind up fighting essentially forever wars because it's good for business, because there's a lot of money that can be made doing that. And oh, we live in Eisenhower's nightmare. If you go back just 34 years, historians were talking about the end of history because the Soviet Union voluntarily, with the second largest nuclear arsenal in the world, voluntarily agreed to stand down peacefully. And they did, and dismantle their empire and support German reunification as a member of NATO. So historians say this is it. America is the only superpower. The other superpower has stood down. They have abdicated communism. They're going to be a free market economy. We're going to integrate them like we did Germany and Japan after World War II, and there will be peace in our time. That was what it was supposed to be. Except what we chose to do was to make Russia an enemy and pursue wars all over the planet somewhere. America has been at war, has had military activity, has used the military to overturn both the military and covert intelligence operations to overturn governments all across this world. 800 military bases, the forever wars, 20 years in Afghanistan with the Taliban running Afghanistan before they got there and the Taliban running Afghanistan after they left, trillions of dollars spent, the forever wars. And one of the main reasons Donald Trump was elected this time was his promise to end the forever wars. This is why he made the deal with Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard left the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party were beholden to the forever war machine. Regime change in Syria, even when you were partnering with Al Qaeda to overthrow Assad. Yeah, that Democratic Party. That's Obama for you. Trump made the deal with Tulsi Gabbard to come in, and he selected her to be the director of national intelligence. Why? Because she stood for the proposition of ending the forever wars. And the primary way to instigate these forever wars was to use black ops intelligence operations through various types of organizations to overthrow and destabilize governments and then sell weapons all over the place. This was economics through the sword. And Tulsi was totally committed to ending that. And yet here we are. If Venezuela wasn't bad enough, and now this is supposed to be the long war, because the Iranians said, we're done with this taking pot shots and killing so many people. And then, oh, we're sorry, we didn't really mean it stuff. If you attack us this next time, we're in it for the long haul. And he did it again. And so these forever wars are draining our treasury, are exhausting our fighting men and women. For what? The national security of the United States is not at stake in any of this. The last time the national security of the United States was at risk was before the Soviet Union stood down. This is Eisenhower's nightmare, the economics of war. And it's tragic and it's persistent, and I believe is Trump's betrayal of the people who elected him. Okay. So that's the fifth of the major existential, mind blowing problems that are pressing humanity. The thing about all of them is this, and it's distilled in a quote from President Kennedy: our problems are man made, therefore they can be solved by man. Well, those wise words, I believe, are absolutely true. But I don't think President Kennedy ever considered that you would have humans who had the capacity to solve the problems that we have and simply choose not to do it. But this is where we are. So, where is the money to solve these problems? I've covered several of these issues in previous episodes. So I'm just going to tick them off and talk a little bit about each, but not the detail. I'll refer you to other episodes if you want to really get into it. Well, the money is not in the broad American population. This wealth and income inequality that has been trending aggressively over the last 50 years. There was a study done by the Rand Corporation that looked at the distribution of income in America from 1946 to 1975 and compared that distribution of income to the distribution of income from 1976 to 2020. Now, the significance of looking at 1946 to 1975, because this is the period that I like to call the Pax Americana. This is the period post World War II. Most of the world is in a shambles. America is in ascendancy. The New Deal had been well established in the 1930s. Then we had World War II. And so coming out of World War II as the one major superpower in the world at this point, and the framer of the new global economy, you had a momentum and a commitment to shared prosperity in the United States that produced the greatest middle class and working class in history. So when the Rand Corporation measured that time frame, 1946 to 1975, they were measuring what we were able to actually accomplish in terms of equality in the country. Then they compared that to 1976 to 2020. And what they found crystallizes the wealth and income inequality problem in America. They found that there had been a $50 trillion redistribution of income from the bottom 90% of earners in the United States to the top 1%. Think about that. A $50 trillion redistribution of income from the bottom 90% of American earners to the top 1%. Okay. To put a bow on how successfully shared prosperity had been destroyed by this concentration of wealth to the top. The Federal Reserve released a study in 2021 that said for the first time in U.S. history, the top 1% of earners and wealth in America had more wealth and income than the American middle class. All that money going up to the top. And let's be clear, per person, per capita productivity has only gone up in America. It isn't that American workers are less productive. It isn't that American workers work less time. They work more time. It is that the income that they get for the productivity that they have has progressively gone down on purpose. And you know why? Well, Michael Douglas said it best in that 1987 movie, Wall Street, Gordon Gekko. Greed is good. Yeah. And it shows. So you have a $50 trillion redistribution of wealth to the top 1%. You have the top 1% having more wealth and income than the American middle class. Can the government come to the rescue? In 216 years, from 1776 to 1992, the United States had $4 trillion worth of debt. That's it, $4 trillion. It's a lot of debt, but $4 trillion. In the 34 years between 1992 and today, federal debt has gone up to 38.7 trillion. So yeah, we added $34.7 trillion in debt since 1992 in the last 34 years. So to be clear, that $34.7 trillion is excess federal spending over and above the taxes we all pay. Okay, so where did it go? Where did all that money go? Did it go to American infrastructure? Bridges and highways and high-speed rail and all this other stuff. We see all these countries, China and France and all these places, have beautiful high-speed rail and everything. Yeah. American infrastructure is rated a C. And I'm finding that questionable given what happened to the bridge in Baltimore and stuff that's happening all over the place. But fine. The American Society of Civil Engineers gave American infrastructure a C. So clearly the 34.7 trillion did not get invested in American infrastructure. We still are using Amtrak, the slow route. Yeah, no high-speed rail across America today. Okay. How are we doing in health? Did the 34.7 trillion get invested in American health? Turns out, in a national study that measures the access and the quality of the health system, of the 17 national systems analyzed, and we're talking about the largest systems in the world, America ranks 15th of 17. So clearly, the 34.7 trillion did not go into American health. The bow on top of that is American life expectancy. Yeah. So American life expectancy has cratered to 34th in the world. 34th. So clearly, this 34.7 trillion has not created outcomes that extended life expectancy in America. They are going down and down fast. How about education? Well, clearly, 34.7 trillion. Everyone must have a free doctorate degree in America, right? No. The United States ranks 31st in education. Do you remember? Go back to the 80s. We used to be amongst the top, if not the top education system in the world. Yeah. 31 right now. So over the last 34 years, spent 34.7 trillion excess dollars. Our federal government. Yes. It didn't go to American middle class, who now have less wealth and income than the top 1%. It didn't go to American health, which is collapsing rapidly. COVID showed us that. where the condition of American health is so bad that we had 25% of the COVID deaths on 4% of the global population. Yeah. So it didn't go to health. It didn't go to education, 31st in the world. Okay. It didn't go to U.S. infrastructure, a C. Well, where did it go? To the wealthiest billionaire class ever. Yeah. Yeah. Let's connect one dot for posterity. Extreme wealth looted the U.S. Treasury because they are the ones who benefited from the 34.7 trillion. And every other demographic in the country demonstrates that they are in worse position today than those billionaires. And how, when you look at the aggregate wealth of the billionaire class, how does that compare with history? Well, we used to think that there was wealth concentration in the 1800s with the Rockefellers, so much that historians call it the Gilded Age. So, how do these cronies compare? It will boggle the mind. First and foremost, and I have my notes right here, Elon Musk's wealth was in excess of 800 billion in 2025. That exceeds, inflation adjusted, the combined wealth of John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie combined. Just Elon Musk. Yeah. The concentration of wealth in today's current billionaire class is an order of magnitude greater than the Gilded Age by 5 to 10 times. Let me repeat that one more time. The current concentration of wealth in the billionaire class is an order of magnitude greater than the Gilded Age, to the tune of 5 times to 10 times the wealth of the Gilded Age. Yeah, this is where all the money went. So this leads us to breadcrumb number 1. I agree with President Kennedy. Our problems are man-made. It was humans who created this wealth and income inequality. It was humans that allowed it to degrade our democracies by buying our governments so that they no longer serve the electing population. It was humans that encouraged us to consume to the point where we exceed the carrying capacity of the earth. It was humans who both innovated fossil fuels and then refused to move out of them once we recognized that they were harming the ecology that sustains current life on Earth. And it's humans who are choosing to make their money fighting wars because we will pay anything for security. So all these problems are man-made. And I agree with President Kennedy. Our problems are man-made, but they're solvable. And you know why they're solvable? Because we know the solutions for all of these problems. And the resources are available. That's it. Breadcrumb number 1. Our problems are man-made, but they're solvable. The problem is, and this is breadcrumbs number 2, extreme wealth demonstrates no interest in solving these 5 major problems that their gluttony has created. That's just the facts, Jack. And so when you look at late stage capitalism over the last 50 years, and I call it late stage capitalism because there was a period of time that, at least from an established, a global north perspective, from an American perspective, there was a period of time it worked. And over the last 50 years, that time has ended. So it's in this ending of that time that I call it late stage capitalism. If you look at how money is made, how we seek profit, the interesting thing that points out the phase of late stage capitalism is it goes from making profit based on revenue growth. You're expanding the pie. You're growing. And for decades, that was successful. We were able to continue to expand the pie. But then as we got into the late 70s and into the 80s, multiple things occurred. And sociologists and economists will have to figure this out. But my best read is as we expanded financialization, as we expanded Wall Street in the 1980s and started teeing up Wall Street as a means for making money, people found out that it was easier to make money in investments, in financial engineering, than it was to innovate new products and services in the broader real economy. And so as Wall Street became a thing through the 1990s, and people were starting to make real money doing financial engineering, so much of the talent that had been in manufacturing, industrial development, had been innovating products and services in the broader economy, got attracted to Wall Street. And engineers, MIT folks, all that. Yeah. Instead of being in industry and innovating, there was a great draw to Wall Street in the 1990s and the 2000s because the money was so good. And what that did was slowed the innovation, and that slowed the capacity to grow GDP with revenue growth. So then, but in the 90s and early 2000s, the shift had been, and it's right in alignment with the Gordon Gekko, greed is good, cost containment. So profit seeking went from growing revenues, expanding the pie, to, okay, if the revenues are not going to grow as much, we got to cut costs because that also produces profits. And so, consistent with Gordon Gekko, greed is good. The cost containment business as usual model, what it does is that the only stakeholder that matters is the shareholder. Yeah, the employees as stakeholders, producers of goods and services, the customers as stakeholders, the consumers of goods and services, and the communities as stakeholders that the businesses serve, all those stakeholders were going to be exploited for the good of the shareholder, the owner. And that's what happened. Employee incomes got cut, employee benefits got cut, the proliferation of the throwing of toxic waste dumps, disserving the community, cutting corners on the safety, product design, front loading the glitter, but the back loading of the quality, not there. Everything designed to fall off a cliff at the soonest possible time. So you have to come back and buy it again. Yeah, things designed intentionally so you can't easily repair it. That's why we have a repair movement in America, because they did that on purpose. All this nonsense maximizes the exploitation of both the employees who produce the goods and services, the customers who buy the goods and services, and the communities in which they live. Yeah, that was the 1990s and the early 2000s. Okay. Then when there was a limit to that, and that's leveraging technology, that's automation and everything. That's a part of the squeeze on human labor. Then when that wasn't producing enough profit, they turned to what economists call inelastic demand, the stuff we gotta have. America is post-industrial, has been post-industrial since the 80s. So if you want to access the skills that you need to compete in a post-industrial society, you got to go to college. You got to get technical skills, all that stuff. Yeah. That's why tuition inflation at the university level exploded through the 90s and the 2000s and actually exceeded healthcare inflation in medical. Look what happened to the generic medical products like the EpiPen. So for-profit pharmaceuticals start buying. The thing about, let me explain in the pharmaceutical industry, basically, if you innovate a product and it's approved by the FDA or whomever needs to approve it, you get a period where you have proprietary rights. No one else can produce it. And then during that period, you get to make most of your money because there's a lot of research and development investment in it. And then once that proprietary period expires, that product becomes generic and anyone can produce it. And so many essential drugs and medical products like the EpiPen had fallen off their proprietary period and they became very reasonable, even though they were essential, even though people used them for diabetes and they used them for all types of things. Okay. Well, what the pharmaceutical industry started doing to shift towards inelastic demand is in the generic industry, because it was a low margin business, usually one primary manufacturer would do all the products. There wasn't any need for massive competition when the margins were so low. And so a for-profit company would come in or an investor would come in, buy that one manufacturer like they did with the EpiPen, and then turn around and blow up the price of the EpiPen. And you remember the controversy about it. This is making your profits now based on things that people have to have because the complete inhumanity of free market capitalism is if you as a consumer have to have it, the cost is everything you got in your pocket and everything you can promise to pay. Period. Okay. So this became the last area in late stage capitalism that the standard business as usual model went towards. And so take a look at the landscape. Everything we have to have is extremely expensive. Healthcare, education, housing, rent, food. That is not by accident. This is where the last of the profits are when they've squeezed all the cost containment that they can. Since they can't grow the revenues anymore, this is where they are. And this is where we are. But living conditions in America are getting critically desperate. The Urban Institute did a study in 2023. And oh, by the way, if you looked around, it's only worse since 2023. But in 2023, for American households that earn 200% of the federal poverty level, and to give you an example of how much that is, for a family of three, that's $55,000. Okay, family of three. To give you further perspective on how prevalent a household earning $55,000 is, the income band for the highest number of American households is between $50,000 and $55,000. The total number of Americans who earn 200% of the federal poverty level is 116 million. Okay, so we're not talking a small number. The Urban Institute's 2023 study found that due to rent inflation, which had blown up since 2021 coming out of COVID, 52% of households earning 200% of the federal poverty level or less are reporting food insecurity in America. 52%. Yeah. This is the critical outcome of the for-profit model turning to the things we have to exploit every last drop out of us. That leads us to breadcrumb number 3. This kind of toxic exploitation is exposing America, is putting America at serious risk of losing social order. Why? We are a proud country. We have been a privileged country. We have generations of Americans who have fought and worked hard and suffered and died to create an environment where it's a given that we can take care of ourselves and our families. We are not used to being able to play by all the rules doing everything right, getting the skills and the talents and adding real value, and still not being able to take care of ourselves and our families. This scenario is not the first time in history this has happened. There was another very proud culture and society who was used to long-term success and had been highly productive for generations, who found themselves in a situation where they could not take care of themselves. Mass populations could not take care of themselves and their families. That was Germany in the 1920s. Yes, the Germans, one of the proudest, richest, culturally significant Western European societies ever. Full stop. Sorry, France. I'm just saying. They weren't used to being impoverished in the 1920s the way they were. The collapse after the Treaty of Versailles was catastrophic in Germany. And this did open the door to them electing Adolf Hitler. Here we are in America, an equally proud country who has achieved, and the working person in America has experienced a level of success that the German working class heads would have exploded to experience that. This American working class is not going to go down this way. There is going to get a point, and we won't know it until this first spark goes off. And brother, Mad Max in Thunderdome is possible in America. And history has taught us that wealth is no protection when the pitchforks come up the hill. Which leads us to breadcrumb number 4. If you are a wealthy person and you feel like you're insulated from the hoi polloi, from the working class, from the mass and the mob, from the 116 million Americans who make 200% of the federal poverty level and paying their rent and eating less, yeah. Understand who provides the security that you are relying on, okay? Because the limit to you being able to pay someone to protect you from the mob is when the people you pay can relate more and align more with the people who make up the mob than they do you. Okay? The thing about it is the totality of the rank and file of the security forces, law enforcement, military, National Guard, whatever, is the American working class. Or at the very upper echelons of the rank and file is the lower middle class. Okay. And it's those other people who are progressively finding that they have to choose between shelter and food. So if the pitchforks come out because people resolve that they cannot take care of themselves and their family, the very people who are protecting you in the larger house up the hill, because, oh, by the way, the billionaire class have invested our taxpayer dollars and everything else in their billionaire bunkers somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that they figure the pitchforks won't be able to swim out there to get them. You become the fodder who just happened to be living in the States and happened to be in the bigger house behind the gate up the hill. Yeah, with all your security forces and stuff like that being working class and middle class people who have the codes. Okay, so I will say, breadcrumb number 4, the limit to co-opting people, to paying people off to take care of you, is when the people who we are exploiting, and I say we, just being kind, they're trying not to point fingers. The people that are being exploited, when those security forces relate more to them than they do to you, this is usually, history teaches, when the security forces turn on you. Okay? So there's no security in this unless you got one of them billionaire bunkers. And even so, oh no, I will do another episode on how AI is going to take care of them. So that said, thankfully, thankfully, I know a lot of gloom and doom, but we need to get real. What's happening on the streets of America, in the homes of America, among some of the hardest working people in America. Remember, the essential workers from COVID are some of the lowest earners in America. These are the people we're talking about. What is happening to them is serious, is dire, and we need to take it seriously, even though we ignore it on our television screens, even though the prevailing narratives act as if it doesn't exist. Don't wait until the pitchforks come out to realize, oh, maybe I should have done something earlier. This is the time to do something now. But thankfully, breadcrumb number 5 is conscious wealth does exist. There are many people outside of that billionaire class who contribute money to try to solve some of these problems. And there's a particular market called the sustainable debt market. And in this market, impact investors, conscious investors say, you know what? I've made enough money to where I don't need to make a return on investment. So I'm willing to accept a lower return on investment in order to accomplish a social goal, wealth and income inequality, affordability of some sort, or a sustainable goal, transition out of fossil fuels to renewable energy production, climate tech, solving energy efficiency problems. Okay, so in order to achieve a sustainable goal or a social justice goal, wealth and income inequality goal, I will, as an impact investor, will take a lower than market return to achieve those goals. And the proof is in the pudding. In 2024, conscious investors funded $1.74 trillion worth of those types of deals. Okay? So proof positive that conscious investors do exist and that they're willing to be a part of the solution because it's essential. Why? This is where the money is. The money has been drained out of the government. The money has been drained out of the working class, out of the middle class, out of much of the upper middle class. The money has been consolidated in the top 5% and certainly primarily in the top 1%. So if you are in the top 5% and you have a family office that you fund, or you have a family investment fund, or you are an individual wealthy millionaire who has individual investments, and your focus is on the legacy of your children, understand the time is now. The time is now to turn your attention to what is happening in America because there is no other source of money besides where the money is consolidated today. And you are it. And the billionaires who have far more than you do, they created this situation on purpose. Yeah, it is not an accident. And so if you're not going to help, the only thing that's going to happen is we will lose social order. And history will just have to play out how that will look. But history has demonstrated over and over again that it does not go well for people who had excess and simply held on to it to the end. So, breadcrumb number 6. It is time for conscious wealth to move away, even though we need climate tech and scalable innovations. We need to get to the kitchen table topics. Conscious investors need to focus in on the critical crisis of housing, food, and healthcare. Because these are things that if many people don't have them, this is when the pitchforks come out. This is when people get to the point of being a Chris Christopherson lyric. Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. And when you're dealing with millions of Americans who have nothing left to lose, And we also happen to be a country of up to 500 million weapons. Understand this is a Molotov cocktail waiting to explode. So, what I'm saying to people who have excess resource, there are many community based, verifiable, valid projects going on to mitigate the problems of housing affordability, to mitigate the problems of food insecurity, to mitigate the problems of lack of access to proper health care. And all these projects are severely under resourced. This is where your money needs to start going and why. We're not going to get to 2030 and reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 43% if we lose social order in America. You look at the global populations in Great Britain, France, Germany, Canada. Yeah. What they just did in Japan, electing a new woman, hopefully it works. What they just did in South Korea, okay, hopefully that stabilizes. The point is that mass populations who understand that they have been betrayed, who understand that they've been left behind, who understand that their governments no longer serve them. There's a risk. And this is why we need to turn our attention on the fact that this is gone too far. And that if we don't solve some of the urgent problems that allow people to turn their focus onto the longer term problems, we're not going to get to solve the longer term problems. So this is my breadcrumb number 6 for conscious investors. We need to move away. Yeah, I'm saying it as a climate consultant. We need to move away from the climate tech and we need to move on to the kitchen table issues. Housing, food, and healthcare access. We can use the same mechanism, the sustainable debt market. We can use the same commercial banks and their capital desks to make sure that the investments actually go to achieve a social goal or a sustainable goal. But we need to move closer to where people are because we are in a situation where this wealth and income inequality has gotten so bad that we can lose social order in America. Now, I, for one, have an idea that I'm working on. And so, yes, this is my podcast, so I'm going to pitch it. It's called the Price Gap Agreement. And what it does is it empowers a conscious investor to bridge the gap between what a credit qualified middle class household can afford and what the home would cost at the market right now. We augment that home with high efficiency energy utilities, heat pumps, water heat pump, and put solar panels on the roof. The whole package costs about $35,000. So for, let's say, $200,000 in the gap, that will be a silent second. That will empower a middle class household to purchase a fully green certified home that they would not otherwise be able to afford. We charge a 3% participation fee for that. 1 point paid by the buyer, the middle class family. 1 point paid by the seller who's selling their house at the market price. And the listing agent and the buying agent provide a 0.5 point each because they're getting a transaction that is only occurring because the impact investor is covering the gap. That's 3 points. So, in a nutshell, the price gap agreement allows an impact conscious investor to help a middle class household purchase a green certified home, and the participation fees helps a lower income household afford to rent a middle class quality property at 30% or less of their take home pay, which is the affordability standard. So now they're not choosing between rent and food. And that is not done with public money. And 100% of the impact investors' money goes into buying the house and upgrading the house, not into fees for anybody. That is doable. And we're pitching this hard as a proof of concept. And this is where we need money for investors. I'm pitching the city of Seattle and their new mayor, Katie Wilson. Don't know how that's going to go. Trying to get to her in every way which I can. But the point being, this is an example, and there are many examples out there of innovative ways to bridge the housing affordability crisis, to bridge the access to healthcare crisis, to bridge the food insecurity crisis in America. There are many ideas out there, and they need conscious impact investors who apparently need to be beneath the billionaire class since the billionaires are demonstrating they're not interested, right? We need your focus now. And that's why this episode is called Show Me the Money. Well, this is Breadcrumbs, a podcast for people who know it's not working. I really appreciate your time as I've walked you through all the problems that face us as major problems, all the resources that are actually available, and the great divide that's stopping us from solving these problems. I hope you've benefited from the conversation. I hope you will participate by putting your comments in the notes. And particularly, I hope, and I'm talking to the wealth, the conscious wealth of this country, the time is now to shift from the scalable climate tech realms into what is happening to most of your neighbors out here. Housing insecurity, food insecurity, lack of access to proper health care. We got to solve those problems or we're not going to get to the long-term solutions. Thank you for your time today. You take care, and I'll see you next time in the conversation.